There are 4 pillars to the sustainable food system. The first pillar is that it is environmentally sound. This means that the goods and services, laws, guidelines, and policies are there to reduce, minimize, or do no harm upon the ecosystem or the environment. The next pillar is that the production remains humane, making it better for the animals. The third pillar is making sure that the product is economically viable. This means that the process is better for local and small producers of the product. The final pillar in the sustainable food systems is that the product is socially just, meaning it is overall better for the people and its consumers. These 4 pillars are the foundation of sustainable food. Benefits of the sustainable food system include protecting the environment, promoting the public and personal health, supporting local farmers and businesses, and protecting the animal and workers' rights. To some, when food production follows all the guidelines from the food system, it is said that the food tastes better. Eating locally has its benefits. Some farmers don't use as much processing or additional ingredients to enhance their product as large industries or companies do. It is easier to control what goes into your products when you use local farmers and businesses. But, with all things, where there are pros, there are also cons. The sustainable food system also has its flaws. One major thing is that the industrialization of the world, there is less open land to farm and grow crops. Farmlands are constantly being destroyed to accommodate the growth of popularity upon business and buildings. Another con to the system is the excessive water and energy it uses to keep small businesses running. With the ability to mass produce, it creates a more efficient way to process food as well as strengthening the shelf life of the product. It is often more expensive to shop locally because there is not as much product as you could find in the supermarket. Natural foods are often more expensive than artificially flavored, mass-produced, preserved product. A personal example once said that they grew up in a place called Lake Point, Utah. They saw firsthand how there was a connection between food and culture. In Lake Point, the food was life. Although it wasn't the family's primary job, to keep their small farm running was extremely busy. Whether they were building shelters for animals, cleaning the pens that kept them in, feeding and watering them, or just getting them to exercise, there was always something to do. The connection to food is that these animals were taken care of, and raising them, they would soon become our meals, and that's how the family ate. There are a lot of different ways that culture connects in food, but farming in the United States is a major one.
With health trends always changing and on the rise, the next thing they are affecting is meat production. In terms of meat production, some go to the extent of saying that plant-based proteins are the future of food. Plant-based proteins are easier to process and can be done for a lot cheaper of a price than raising livestock. In a 2015 research, it found that increased consumer demand means that alternatives to meat and fish could potentially claim up to 33%, or 1/3 of the world's protein market by 2054. The report goes on to say that soy will take a projected 80% share of the alternative market in the short term. It is a controversial topic in the world today. The debate on what method of protein is best for the consumer may never be solved. In that article, it stated that the popularity of meat-based protein still remains the leading source of preferred protein in the study. Over the last decade, the worldwide meat production has tripled, and production is expected to double again by 2050. It is unclear which is more environmentally sound, meat proteins or alternative proteins, but we do know that it is under careful observation and study to find what is overall best for its consumers. According to an article on eatinghealthy.sfgate.com, only about 1/3 of the world's consumption of proteins comes from animals raised for food. And although in the United States most of the red meat consumption is from pork or beef, about 63% of red meat eaten around the world is from goat. Goat can be a much less expensive and more sustainable type of meat because it needs much less water than a cow or a pig, and it doesn't need as much food. The most interesting fact in this article, though, is that 80% of people around the world regularly consume one or more of the 1,700 edible types of insects. Although these may be trends in the world for consuming protein, in my opinion, I don't see that changing anytime soon for the United States. Growing up on a small farm, I was able to see firsthand how expensive and possibly unsustainable meat production can be. In the case with larger animals like pigs and cows, you need to have money to make money from them. It's easy to see why so many farmers turn to alternative food sources for animals, even if it isn't as healthy for that animal, as well as sometimes not providing the best circumstances for that animal. Raising animals can be really expensive, and it's important to remember the sustainability, the quality of the meat, as well as the quality of the animals' lives during that process.
The Philippines is a group of islands located in southeastern Asia. It consists of more than 711,000 islands and spans about 300,000 square kilometers, making it the longest discontinued coast. The country has a total of 96,000 square kilometers of agricultural land, which is about 32% of their total land area. Thus, the Philippines their economy is very heavily based on agriculture. Their land that they utilize is usually for plantation of palay, corn, fruit, trees, root crops, vegetables, coconut, sugarcane, and other various crops. While some of what they make is exported to other nations, mostly China, the US, and Korea, they consume a lot of the products that they grow, making their food a very sustainable option for them. This benefits their country in many ways. For one, it boosts their economy while supporting small-time farmers and businesses, and since everything is locally grown and fresh, it tastes much better. A total of $753 million worth of seafood was exported in 2014, most of it being fish, as only about 30% of it is either crustacean or mollusks, and almost 3% being poultry or meat, and 1.5% being some other animal. On the other hand, though, due to overfishing in the last decades, the number of fish being reeled in has been decreasing, and many small-time farmers have had to use more time and resources to venture out farther into the ocean. Many have stated that they can't afford to eat what they catch anymore, making some of their food options now, especially fish, not as sustainable as before. Aiding in this decrease in fish population could also be their water supply, as due to rapid industrialization and their urbanization, water pollution is becoming a major issue in the Philippines and other similar countries going through the same development. An estimated 67 billion pesos, or $1.3 billion, have been spent annually due to water pollution. Only 36% of the country's river water is usable to the public, and 58% of the groundwater sampled shown to contain bacteria known as coliform, which is commonly used to identify the sanitary conditions in food and water. The lack of sufficient water can have a drastic effect on the sustainability and the access of food and resources in their country.
Here in Utah, we receive 14.08 inches of water annually. The national average is 39.17 inches, making Utah's amount 25.1 inches less than the national average. Each individual within our region uses about 50 to 100 liters of personal use, leaving far less water than is needed to produce the amount of meat that we need. Within the meat industry, certain types of animals use more or less water than another. More water is used to raise 1 pound of beef than it is to raise 1 pound of chicken, and even less to raise an equivalent amount of insects. Which makes us wonder why we don't put all our efforts into producing insects in the end. Other countries outside of our country don't have the resources that we have. Their water is not as clean and is far more toxic, which can end up poisoning their produce and even their fish. This can create a very large food shortage within their community. Here in America, we tend to be very lucky, and we need to use our water in a more efficient way to produce the amount of meat that we need in order to avoid a food shortage in the end.